30 weeks of protests in Algeria show no sign of ending. The army-backed government is refusing calls to quit before a new election. Can anything break the stalemate? And is there room for compromise? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. It's been more than 5 months since mass protests forced Algeria's long-serving president Abdelaziz Bouteflika to step down. Since then, members of his former government have been resisting calls to quit as well. Demonstrators have held 30 weeks of rallies. They want Bouteflika's former ministers and the army to give power to civilians and to release detained opposition leaders. But the powerful military chief is standing firm. Ahmed Gaid Salah is urging people to support plans for a presidential election as soon as possible. But the protesters want him and the ruling elite to go before any vote.
They have to free all those detained. Gaid Salah and his government, Prime Minister Noureddin Bedoui, everyone has to quit.
If you want the protest movement to stop, there's only one way, and that is to yield to the Algerian people. This will be peaceful until the end. It is the future of our children, and we will remain peaceful.
These politicians should be brought to justice, and we should witness this. The people will not stop until their demands are met. As for the elections, it's up to the people to decide. They won't vote, and there'll be no elections.
And here's how the events unfolded in Algeria. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets in February to denounce Abdelaziz Bouteflika's plans to seek a 5th presidential term. Weeks of mass demonstrations eventually forced him to resign in April, and he was replaced by interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah. But protesters say the real power lies with the army chief, Ahmed Gaid Salah. The protesters then pressured the government to cancel presidential elections in July. But the government and the military have been reluctant to offer further concessions. General Gaid Salah is pushing for an early vote and wants the interim president to announce a December date. Let's bring in our guests. Here in the studio is Youcef Bouandel, Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Qatar University in Algiers. On Skype, Akram Khrayev, journalist at the Middle East Eye. Also in Algiers, on the phone, Amal Boubakar, Research Fellow at the School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences. Welcome to you all. Youcef, why do protesters reject Ahmed Gaid Salah's push for elections to be held by the end of this year?
Simply because the demands of the protesters have not been met yet. Obviously, since the 22nd of February, when the demonstration started, the demonstrations had clear demands. Some of them have been met. For instance, President Bouteflika left, Belaiz left, he was the president of the Constitutional Council, but the demonstrations are still asking for Bedoui and his government to go. Up till now, Bedoui is still the prime minister, and he will, for the time being, oversee the elections. Algerians have been calling for Bedoui to go. He was Minister of Interior. He managed to get almost 6 million signatures for Bouteflika's 5th term in office, etc.
And people say they don't basically trust him.
They don't trust him because...
And therefore he has to go.
Therefore he has to go. The demonstrators are also asking for an independent commission to supervise the elections. For the time being, Reuters told us a few days ago that Bedoui's days in office were numbered, and the second thing is the Minister of Justice, Mr. Zarmati, has promised Algerians that an independent commission to supervise the elections will be established shortly, and it will be completely independent. So to me, this is a move, at least to appease the demonstration, telling them that when elections take place, it will be clean, honest and transparent.
Akram, the politics is about compromise, and the army chief Ahmed Gaid Salah was hoping to see elections take place in July. Protesters said no, and I think the army caved into those demands. But now they are insisting there needs to be a constitutional way out of the crisis in Algeria, the people saying at the same time, no. Don't you think that this is something that could lead to a deep political crisis in Algeria?
Yes, and you are pointing something very important, which is the stubbornness of the two sides. Today we have a chief of staff who's totally obsessed of this idea of going to a quick election, no matter how it would be done. And at the other side, we have anger growing every Friday because every day that passes, there's mistakes and there's things, people are arrested, and new laws, new people appointed that are upsetting the people on the street. So yes, there's a need for a compromise, but today we don't see any will from the chief of staff, from the regime, to do any concession. For instance, they could have been successful to make people go back to their homes by releasing the political prisoners or the freedom of expression of prisoners. So anyone can call them however he wants. He could have also been very successful by suggesting the removal of the prime minister, appointing some non-partisan ministers or prime ministers, and so on. So there was no concession made by that side since 6 months now, and this is making the people more and more angry. But it also shows that this protest without leadership works, because without this leadership, the regime and the government, also the chief of staff, cannot apply any pressure on people, cannot buy people. So there's kind of resilience shown now within the movement.
Amal, if the army chief insists on taking the path of elections by December, and the opposition or the pro-democracy movement is saying, no, we're not going to go that way, what are the options left for Algeria?
Well, there are actually several options, but I think we should not think of the army or the people as two entities that have not negotiating at all, or there have been several and huge achievements for the past 6 months. There has been a kind of silent negotiation that has been going on between Gaid Salah and the other generals and the people, the demonstrators from the Hirak. These past 6 months have led to a situation that Algeria has never experienced before, and which is the refusal of the people to play by the regime's rules, and that will be crucial to understand what kind of way out we can consider. First, they have refused to simply withdraw from the official political life. You know that before, Algerians were saying, well, we know that we are going to have shame elections, we know that Bouteflika will be re-elected again and again, and that's not our business, we will just withdraw. But now they say, no, we want accountability. That's one of their core demands. We want bodies that are able to make these elections transparent and accountable, and that's not something they are going to drop. They also said, before they were maybe satisfied with the redistribution of the oil rent scramble. Now they say, no, we want a proper start working economy. And that's also something very important. They were also quite indifferent, Algerians, before February 22nd, towards repression. They were saying it's not a conflict between us and between the army, it's a conflict between the regime and the opposition parties. And now they are saying, no, we are all concerned. It's about us. It's about the illegal immigrants, the Haraga. It's about children who are not benefiting from a proper education system. It's about the young unemployed and so on. So they have enlarged their demands, and it's the rebirth of a nation that is going on. It's not only a matter of having elections or not. And the most important achievement, I believe, that will have a major impact on a potential way out is the refusal to negotiate with intermediaries. You know that before Algerians were offered just had conflicts, corporate actors, and so on. They're saying, no, we want to negotiate with the army. The king is naked. Now they are saying this is the army who is in command.
Youcef, because it's the most organized institution in Algeria, the army found itself at the very heart of this whole political debate now in Algeria. Could it be that they are concerned that any way out that is not within the constitution could drive Algeria towards an uncharted political territory, and this is why they are rejecting the notion of a radical change without going to elections first of all?
Obviously, like you said, the military is the most organized institution in the country. It has always been the real power holder in Algeria. Let's not forget that the Algerian military or the Algerian army was born before Algeria achieved its independence. So, and the military institution sees itself as the custodian of the nation. Every single president of Algeria either has been drawn from the military or had the military support. Now, Gaid Salah has always insisted that the solution should be within the constitution and we should not be seen to get out of the constitution. But obviously the situation we're in at the moment is not necessarily constitutional. Gaid Salah wants some elections before the end of the year. This will obviously depend on the Hirak, and the Hirak is refusing it. For the last 30 weeks or so, I think the Hirak has grown stronger. They know it's a very, very important occasion that it should not, it's a very important opportunity that should not be missed. If they miss it, they will go back to how they used to live for the last 30 years. So it's very, very important for the Hirak to make sure that that a new system is established. We talk about moving to a new republic or a second republic, whatever you want to call it, but they know that if they miss this opportunity, it will be basically the hope is lost. I think that Gaid Salah is making some compromise. When I talk about Gaid Salah, not as a person, but as the institution, he represents that institution. So he is making some compromise, even though that compromise is not obvious. I believe that calling for the creation or the establishment of this independent commission to supervise the elections, and Zarmati in particular, somebody who has been fighting corruption over the last few weeks. He put some very, very important high-ranking officials in the Bouteflika's regime in jail. He called on the Algerian parliament to lift immunity on some other names. So probably they will join Al-Harraj prison in the next 2 weeks or so. So this is somebody that the Algerian trusts very much, and he promised that he would fight corruption to the end. He also promised that the new established commission to supervise elections will ensure that elections will be fair and transparent, and it will be independent, and all the nice words that Algerian wants to hear. So I see this as a compromise from the military institutions, as a way, it's like an olive branch to the protesters. But the protesters, to my mind, have the upper hand at the moment because they can disrupt everything. At the end of the day, they will not sign, because anybody who wants to become president needs 60,000 signatures from different wilayas in Algeria. So maybe the protesters would not endorse.
Which will create a huge problem for...
So nobody will meet the constitutional requirements to run for elections. The second thing, how can a candidate, how can he or she run her presidential electoral campaign if the street is not happy with it? So I think that the street has the upper hand at this stage. I think may force further concessions. Let's not forget that this commission of dialogue headed by Karim Younes, former president of the Algerian parliament, despite not being recognized, at least something good came out of it, because he said that the president Ben Salah is not necessarily against the idea of Bedoui going. Reuters told us last week that Bedoui's days in office are numbered. So let's wait for the next
see what happens next
week or so.
Akram, I mean, we do understand why an army chief needs to be seen as standing firm the case of Ahmed Gaid Salah. But when you say in a speech to the people, you are either with me or betraying Algeria, isn't this some kind of message that would further antagonize hundreds of thousands of Algerians who would see the army threatening them in a way or another to follow its guidance?
Yeah, completely. I think there's a lack of political behavior or political understanding from his side. He's applying too much pressure on too many people, and he's getting more and more afraid about his direct entourage and also about the reaction of the people. We have seen him changing narratives in 1 or 2 days, in one or two speeches. So the real issue is that today we have a misunderstanding from the side of the army that the people who are now in the street, they don't want to negotiate with the army, and they don't want even to negotiate something with the army apart from a regime change and also more political openness and more political freedom. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. Amal, the arrest of Karim Tabo, one of the key figures in the pro-democracy movement, how is it seen in Algeria? Is it an indication that the army perhaps is not willing to accept dissent? Because the last statement he made or interview was a staunch, was lashing out basically at Ahmed Gaid Salah.
No, it's much more understood as a way to frighten the protesters as before. I mean, Karim Tabo is not the first to have been arrested, but it's not about, when you talk to people in Algiers and other countries, in other cities in Algeria who are protesting, they say it's not about election, it's not about individuals, it's about which rules will lead the negotiations, basically. And there may be three ways out, or three ways to scenario. Well, first, business as usual is out of option. I can tell you that nobody will accept elections to be held in December. Second, there may be the scenario of a split, and that's something that Algerians have been tempted with from the very beginning, which means that they may organize their own transitions, their own local councils to discuss the possibility of having a National Constituent Assembly elected outside of any kind of institutional framework. But it's still difficult because they don't have they don't have the money to do so. I mean, it could be complicated, even if they are not afraid to be repressed, and I also don't think they will be repressed. And finally, the more probable scenario could be a negotiated pact. But the main obstacle that we have in Algeria to reach this kind of pact is that in Algeria we do not have an architecture that has been taught to have the army exposed, quite the contrary. So everything is done to let the hierarchy and protesters to negotiate with anyone but the army. So first, we will need to have the army to acknowledge that this negotiated pact will be reached between the army and the people, and it will be only about the army, I would say, and that will include a kind of give and take kind of move with the idea of amnesty and so on. And so this is the only way to acknowledge that the army is in control and that the people should be ready to negotiate with the army.
And since we're talking about those future scenarios, Youcef, you said that the pro-democracy movement has the upper hand. However, Karim has been saying that basically this is a movement that is leaderless in a way or another. Isn't this a risk on its own? Because how can you negotiate with people who don't seem to have a sense of clarity, a chain of command about how to move forward, what kind of transition we'd like to have for the future, what kind of candidates we have to put into place for the presidential election, who should be the member of the National Unity Government? They're talking the talk, but they don't seem to be willing to walk the walk.
Well, obviously they don't have obvious leaders simply because they said from the beginning that if we do have a leader, then this person could be bought, could be threatened, could be whatever. So they don't want to have a proper leadership. There's some certain organization. People are talking to each other, organizing themselves in non-official movements and so on and so forth. But the most important thing is that the demands are more or less clear. They have a clear idea of what they want, and they share so many characteristics. They just don't want anybody from Bouteflika's regime, so exclusion. So nothing, get rid of Bedoui and his government. So many names that are clean, that who have not been associated with corruption in Algeria, like Ahmed Ibrahimi, for instance, was mentioned as a potential person to head as head of state. They mentioned Ahmed Ben Bitour, for instance, and there are a few names in there. So it does not take a genius to figure out what those the demonstrators want. Obviously, what I say, have the upper hand in terms of they can disrupt anything they have. The numbers, they would not go and give their signatures to potential candidates. They would not.
They have leverage in a way or not.
Yes, this is it. But the army, again, is the most important institution, and it needs to make
calculated moves.
They want to make some sort of concessions to be seen that they are going with the Iraq for the establishment of a proper democracy.
Akram, do you have a sentiment that the pro-democracy movement is losing the battle? Because we've seen them over the last few months, particularly before the summer, building momentum. That does not seem to be the case anymore. They are no longer present in most of the cities across the country, and they are very much confined now in basically one or two streets in the capital, Algiers.
It is obvious that a big bet was put on this idea of a decrease of the Iraq during summer and especially during Ramadan. But even though it decreased during that period because the weather conditions were very, very hot, the critical mass that meant something politically was always achieved. We always had tens of thousands of people in the street, at least in 2, 3, 4 big cities across the country. And also the slogans and the chants were still very strong and very meaningful. What we see now since this back to school, since the beginning of September, is a huge revival of the movement. Yesterday was a great day with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, affecting more than 45 cities in the country. So, which is pretty much significant.
I see your point. Amal, do you feel like the army has managed to outsmart the protesters, and that ultimately it could be what the army decides for the future of Algeria?
I think that any kind of decision they will make will have to take into account what kind of legitimacy they want to get. They used to play on their historic legitimacy, the army of liberation, the struggle against France, and so on. Now they do have to renew themselves. And what the main demand is, and actually much more than just having elections and a kind of democratic representative system, is the main demand is centered around the idea of a state of peace. So I think that will be a major move that will show us if the army is really willing to negotiate or not. It's to respect basic civil rights and liberties by stopping to have political prisoners. They have shown for the past 4 months that they won't repress, as I said, violently any kind of demonstrations. There have been also there have been signs from the police also that they won't stand in the way of the protesters. So basically, we should understand and we should focus on the idea of a state of law and look at the compromises the army is able to make on this specific idea of civil basic rights.
Thank you, Emma. It will be interesting to see what will take Algeria and all the key players to come to a compromise and break the political deadlock. Amal Boubacar, Akram Khrayef, Youcef Bouandel, I really appreciate your contribution to the program today. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem, Ahelbarra, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.